how to recover effectively to improve performance at work and avoid burnout. The highlights of this blog are, first, 2 conditions for a recovery strategy to be effective, and second, a 6-step method for implementing effective recovery strategies. And you can also listen to this blog and read it at the links in the comments. Many of us enter the new year with heightened motivation, replenished energy, and ambitious goals for the year ahead. During January, people tend to knuckle down to focus on work, health, and self-improvement. These 3 categories capture the most common New Year's resolutions. This year, over a quarter of American adults surveyed about their resolutions are committing to saving more money, while around 1 in 5 are resolving to improve their physical health, exercise more, be happy, or eat healthier. Half of UK adults surveyed are resolving to eat healthier, over 40% are aiming to be fitter or lose weight, and almost a third are focusing on their finances or prioritising their mental health. Unfortunately, most New Year's resolutions don't last long. One study found that 23% of people quit by the end of the first week of January and 43% by the end of the month. A more recent survey inspires a little more optimism, finding that the average resolution lasts 3.74 months. As we enter the new year with big ambitions, we need to implement effective habits for maintaining productivity and motivation long term. Without these, our laudable aims for 2025 risk quickly collapsing like most New Year's resolutions. Arguably the most important habit to build for long-term productivity and motivation is recovery. This refers to practices that clear your mind, help you de-stress, and replenish your energy and motivation after experiencing stress. Without effective recovery, we reduce our ability to maintain high performance long term, and we increase our risk of burnout. So what makes a recovery strategy effective? Well, there are 2 conditions for a recovery strategy to be effective. First, it engages the parasympathetic nervous system. Second, it takes your mind off the things stressing you out. Let's start with the first. Our autonomic nervous system controls involuntary bodily processes such as our breathing, heart rate, and blood pressure. It contains 3 components, 2 of which are the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. These regulate how our bodies respond to stress. The sympathetic nervous system, also known as the fight or flight response, becomes activated in response to perceived dangers. Our heart rate and blood pressure increase, and we experience a surge of energy. The parasympathetic nervous system, also known as the rest and digest response, becomes activated once we've perceived the danger has passed. Our heart rate and blood pressure decrease, and we experience calmness and relaxation. The sympathetic nervous system can be triggered by anything we perceive to be highly stressful. This ranges from genuine dangers, such as a car speeding towards us, to something highly stressful but not dangerous, such as that big presentation you're giving tomorrow, or that difficult conversation you're having with your spouse tonight. We can even trigger our sympathetic nervous system just by thinking about something we find highly stressful. Stress isn't problematic when it's manageable. Indeed, a moderate amount of stress can be beneficial, providing us with the energy, motivation, and focus we need to push ourselves to our limits and achieve our goals. For stress to be managed, it needs to be followed by effective recovery. In our busy working lives, we experience many things that activate our sympathetic nervous system, but comparatively fewer that activate our parasympathetic nervous system. This can lead to chronic stress, which can negatively impact our health in many ways, such as increasing our risk of burnout and heart disease. So, the first condition for a recovery strategy to be effective is that it engages the parasympathetic nervous system. Ask yourself, what activities really help me relax? Particularly good ones are meditation, breathwork, yoga, getting a massage, taking a hot bath, relaxing in a sauna or steam room, reading a novel, and taking a walk in nature. However, even the most optimal activities for engaging the parasympathetic nervous system will only be effective for recovery if the second condition is also met. That is, taking your mind off stress. The second condition is that the activity takes your mind off the things stressing you out. Now, I recently discussed this with Daniel Goleman, psychologist and the world's leading expert on emotional intelligence, and Daniel Goleman described what is perhaps the most important rule for effective recovery in the conversation, which is a podcast interview linked in this blog. That rule is as follows. For a recovery strategy to be effective, it needs to enable you to switch off from whatever is causing you stress. Now, this applies even to those activities I just mentioned, which are great for engaging the parasympathetic nervous system, such as relaxing in a sauna or steam room. This is how Daniel Goleman put it in our conversation. Quote, "Here's the key. It doesn't matter what the activity is, but for it to work for you, it has to get your mind off the thing that's preoccupying you. When we're stressed, the primitive brain treats that as a threat or an emergency. One of the things it does is fixate attention on what's troubling you. You want to stop that cycle of ruminating. What's going to get your mind off that? That's the key to what's really going to relax you." End quote. Now, from this, Daniel Goleman identified an important hazard to keep in mind when we implement recovery strategies. This is the inverse of the previous rule for effective recovery I just described, and it gives us a second rule, which is now a rule for identifying ineffective recovery strategies. A recovery strategy is ineffective if it doesn't enable you to switch off from whatever is causing you stress. For instance, after work you might love going to yoga class followed by taking a long hot bath. Now, on paper that sounds like an optimal recovery strategy which will engage your parasympathetic nervous system. But if you spend much of that time ruminating over the things stressing you out and you continue to feel stressed afterwards, this won't function as effective recovery. So, for example, if your mind keeps running through how you'll navigate a difficult conversation with your boss tomorrow morning or a high-stakes meeting with clients tomorrow afternoon, you're not recovering because you're not switching off from your sources of stress. You're actually continuing to work in the sense that you're mentally rehearsing for what you'll do at work the following day. Now, mental rehearsal is an effective form of learning, and I've linked a previous blog I've written on that in this blog, but it's not an effective form of recovery. Now, we can combine these two conditions for effective recovery, and when we combine them, we draw attention to an important point. An effective recovery strategy doesn't need to engage your parasympathetic nervous system for the entire duration of the time you schedule for recovery. You can pair an activity that enables you to switch off from stress but doesn't engage the parasympathetic nervous system with one that does engage the parasympathetic nervous system, and this pairing can function as an effective recovery strategy overall. The former activity can even be something physically or cognitively demanding that engages the sympathetic nervous system, as long as it fulfills the second condition I described earlier of taking your mind off whatever is causing you stress. For instance, let's say you love high-intensity interval training and playing chess, the former of which is physically demanding and the latter cognitively demanding. You find that either of these helps you completely take your mind off the sources of stress you experience, even on your most intense days at work. So either activity is excellent at fulfilling the second condition I described above. Now, either of these could function as part of an effective recovery strategy, as long as you pair them with activities that engage your parasympathetic nervous system. For example, you could follow the former, high-intensity interval training, with meditating in the sauna, and you could follow the latter, playing chess competitively if you like, demanding matches against opponents who are at least at your level or better. You could pair that with a walk in nature with friends. The activity now as a whole meets both those conditions I described earlier of engaging your parasympathetic nervous system and taking your mind off the things that stress you out. Now, if you lead a high-stress lifestyle and intense physical exercise is your go-to choice of exercise, it's particularly important that you follow that kind of exercise with an activity that engages your parasympathetic nervous system. For example, if you work long hours in a demanding job and your go-to exercise is high-intensity interval training, say a HIIT class at lunchtime or at the end of the day, it's really important that you pair that with an activity that engages your parasympathetic nervous system. Because if you lead a stressful lifestyle and you combine that with only high intensity exercise, and you don't also do activities that engage your parasympathetic nervous system, this can lead to elevated chronic physiological stress. And I recently discussed this point on our podcast, Flourish FM, with nutrition expert Dr. Federica Amati, and that is linked in the blog. All right, here's a 6-step method for finding and implementing effective recovery strategies. And this is particularly useful as we enter 2025, the year ahead. First step, write down activities that really help you relax. Second step, write down activities that take your mind off the stressful things in your life. Now, some of your responses to those 2 questions will be the same. That's great, because those are likely to be effective recovery strategies you've identified, because these questions concern those 2 conditions for effective recovery I described earlier. Some of your responses might be different though. If it helps, you could answer these questions using a Venn diagram, looking for correlations and overlaps between your 2 answers. So where the answer is the same for those 2 questions, you could put it in the intersection between the 2 circles. And I've included a diagram in the blog you can use. So you, for example, put your answers to the first question, the left-hand circle, answers to the second question, the right-hand circle, and where the answer is the same for both, you can just write it in the middle to identify activities that answer both those questions and tick both boxes for effective recovery. Now, if any of the activities in your answer to the second step aren't included in the first step, I've got a third step for you to follow here. But if your answers to those first 2 steps were the same, you can skip this third step. Okay, here's the third step. For any activities you wrote in response to the second step, which you didn't include in response to the first step, pair the activity you identified in the second step with an activity you put in your answer to the first step, which you could do after the activity you identified in answer to that second step. So for example, in your answer to the second step, second question, you might have written playing tennis. Okay, playing tennis might be an activity that really takes your mind off the stressful things in your life. Now ask yourself which activity you wrote in response to the first, for example, meditation as an activity that really helps you relax, could you do after playing tennis? For example, could you meditate or take a hot bath when you get home from playing tennis? Okay, so once you've completed those 2 or 3 steps, you should now have a list of effective recovery activities. And you might just have 1, and that's fine. Next, fourth step. If you've got more than 1, rank the activities or the pairs of activities, if you're tying 2 together, based on how effective they are at those first 2 steps. That is, how effective they are at helping you relax and taking your mind off the stressful things in your life. For me, my top activities we ranked as follows. Top is meditating the sauna. I absolutely love doing that. Second is pickleball, playing pickleball, followed by meditating the sauna. Third is high intensity interval training classes, followed by meditating the sauna. Fourth is ice skating, my latest hobby. I now have ice skating lessons, followed by meditating the sauna. And finally, reading novels, which is itself very relaxing. I find it very relaxing. I don't need to meditate in the sauna after that. And note that the second, third, and fourth of those I mentioned, pickleball, HIIT classes, and ice skating, I pair them with the first, meditating the sauna, to ensure the activity as a whole is effective recovery. Okay, that's the fourth step. Fifth step, pick the activity or the activities that you most want to do this year. Okay, now we're putting some real fun into this. Now I recommend prioritizing those that you ranked highest, because those are likely to be the most effective recovery activities overall. But if you most want to do ones that aren't ranked at the top, that's absolutely fine. Okay, you've identified all these as effective recovery strategies. That's good enough. Motivation to do the activity is vital. Okay, work with your motivation as a key factor in helping you to do these recovery activities regularly and really help you recover in order to balance and manage stress better. And it's absolutely fine if you want to pick all of them. Okay, I've mentioned a bunch that I do there. Meditation, the sauna, pickleball, HIIT classes, ice skating, real novels. I do these, to varying degrees each week. It's fine to do all of them. Okay. Sixth and final step. Build that activity, all those activities, into your daily schedule after you finish your working day. Now, there's no strict limit to the number of activities you choose here or how often you do them. There's only one rule. You schedule at least one of them after you finish your working day. This way, the activity helps take your mind off the things from work that may be causing you stress and thereby helps you wind down for the most important of all recovery practices, sleep. Stress often negatively impacts sleep, which leads to a vicious cycle known as the sleep-stress cycle, because poor sleep in turn exacerbates stress. Stress in turn exacerbates poor sleep. I'm going to post a blog soon on strategies for optimizing sleep. I'm deeply interested in sleep research and how we can optimize our sleep. Now, from the list I gave you earlier, personally, I meditate in the sauna or I read a novel most days of the week. And it might be only 15 minutes in the sauna. It might be only reading a page or two of a novel, okay? But it's enough to really relax me and help me calm down. I play pickleball 2 or 3 times a week. I do high intensity training once or twice a week, and I go ice skating once or twice a week. Now, there's also no rule on how long you do each recovery activity for. Even 5 minutes of meditation a day has been shown to significantly reduce stress and anxiety. The general principle I recommend is that you schedule at least enough time doing the activity that it takes your mind off whatever is stressing you out. Now, that may vary based on how stressful your day was, but you can gauge a reasonably accurate amount of time you generally need to do the activity for by trying and testing different durations. So you might find, for example, that 30 minutes of swimming or reading fiction always takes your mind off stress, but only 15 minutes isn't long enough. So here, there's 3 T's you can remember: try, test, and track. As I mentioned earlier, just 15 minutes meditating in the sauna is enough to really calm me down and chill me out after experiencing stress. Perhaps not very high stress, but having a stressful day really does work. So try which activities and what lengths of time were best for you. Okay, now most importantly, have fun. Okay, beyond those 6 steps above, you can have fun deciding when you'd like to do these activities you've identified. How about a ceramics class on Saturday? How about Sunday brunch with friends? How about a spa next month? Okay, look at your calendar, see when you can do these things, and have some fun exploring some activities you'd most love to do this year. I recommend picking your top 2 or 3 activities to do regularly, but if you've only picked one, that's absolutely fine. Just do that. Okay, so the takeaway. For a recovery strategy to be effective, 2 conditions need to be met. First, it engages the parasympathetic nervous system, and second, it takes your mind off the things stressing you out. There are many excellent recovery practices that fulfill the first of those conditions, but fulfilling that condition might not be sufficient for helping us recover. It also needs to enable us to switch off from sources of stress. Try the 6-step method I've described for implementing effective recovery strategies. All right, some questions for you. Which recovery strategies do you most find effective? What's a new recovery strategy you're trying this year? And what strategy do you discover following that method I've just described? I'd love to hear about your experiences in the comments or any other thoughts you have about effective recovery. And in the blog, you can find a whole list of recommended resources, some of which I've linked in the blog itself in the writing. Others I just recommend in connection with this theme. We've got books, peer-reviewed journal articles, research reports, media articles, and podcast episodes. Thank you for listening or watching or reading. I hope you've enjoyed this, and I look forward to hearing how these recovery strategies have worked out for you.